Hey guys, and welcome back to Field Notes. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than videos I've done in the past. I want this to really be a discussion. We're going to be talking about a topic that doesn't really have a black and white or a real clear answer, but I wanted to discuss this because I have recently read a book, and that was Chasing Aphrodite, which is the hunt for looted antiquities in the world's richest museum. So really the idea that we are going to keep coming back to is who owns history. And so that is something that I want us to kind of keep in mind while we talk about this, because I think it kind of directly influences our ideas surrounding this topic. So for anybody who is not really versed in the history of museums, this book would probably be pretty shocking. Historically, a lot of museums have gotten their first antiquities or their first artifacts through some sketchy means. One of the biggest culprits have been British museums, and that's simply because they were a dominant world power for such a long time. A lot of the time, the British just simply took artifacts out of home countries because they were there, they were in power, or sometimes there was a rich guy and he decided that he wanted it. If you go to a museum today, sometimes when you look at a plaque, they will say something like, donated by a private collector. And while that sounds like a reasonable statement, we have to start thinking, well, wait, why did this guy have this? How did he obtain a collection of these things? So not all of the time does that necessarily mean that the artifact is looted. Sometimes it means that there is a painting that has been passed down through generations, maybe from the original painter, but a lot of the time it means that this collector has taken something out of a country maybe when they weren't supposed to. I think we have a tendency to think that looting artifacts is a problem of the past, but it really isn't. Looting is still a really big problem in places like Egypt, where they are constantly trying to protect tombs of pharaohs and burial sites from looters, but it also has started to become more noticeable as a problem in the United States. In the United States, it is focused on Native American artifacts, and that is one of the reasons why we have such strict laws about damaging rock art. And even this book, a lot of it takes place in modern times. And what I mean by modern times is the Aphrodite statue that they talk about throughout this book. Its story comes to an end in 2010. So very recently. So if we are to acknowledge that the British and US museums have looted artifacts, the next question is, well, what do we do about that? There's not a lot we can do about things that have already happened. We can't unloot something, but we can choose what we do going forward, and we can choose what we do with the artifacts that we know have been looted. An argument that is fielded a lot is that Britain and the US are more capable of taking care of these big pieces of history, so they should remain in the countries that have taken them. I always find this argument a little bit ironic, considering how much we've already damaged them. For one thing, coming from a very anthropological and archaeologically based perspective, we have destroyed something called the primary context. And this is something that we cannot fix. Once we have taken it out of the ground and removed it from where it originally was, we have destroyed primary context. And by destroying that, we really limit the amount that we're even able to learn about a piece to begin with. We've also hurt things in more obvious ways. One of the most famous examples are Greek marbles. Like I've said, a lot of this looting happens when a rich guy decides that he wants something, and there probably is no better example than Lord Elgin. He probably is most famously known for the removal of the statues at the Acropolis. And not only did he remove one and take it back to Britain, but he broke one while trying to remove it. He also had a tendency to just take a saw to architecture and saw off friezes. And a lot of these are still in British museums. When museums have received these marbles, they not only have been possibly not taken very good care of in transit, but once they actually received them and got them ready for display, they would clean them. We have a misconception that these marble statues were very clean, white, pure statues. And that really wasn't the case. When they were being ready to put on display, because that is something that we used to think, they were oftentimes cleaned and scrubbed, which dissolved and weakened the stone, it ruined details, and it also removed any traces of paint. Marble is a very soft and very soluble stone. You've noticed this a lot when you go to a gravestone. Marble headstones will dissolve very quickly. You'll see kind of blank gravestones because any sort of acidity that is in water will dissolve marble. Thankfully, most of the washing has stopped in modern times, and we do actually see that some of these marbles were painted very vivid colors. Oh, this is a shiny book. One of the better examples is actually what they have on the cover here, which is two griffins eating a dough, and you can see there's some red, the feathers are blue. This was a very vividly painted marble statue. So kind of on the flip side, another argument is that they should be returned. In more recent years, a lot of the archaeologically rich countries have made a really strong push for their artifacts to be returned. Most notably and most discussed in this book are Italy and Greece. This is where I start to have a problem with this book and its tone. There is no easy answer, there is no clear-cut way we should be dealing with these artifacts, but I am of the general belief that they should be returned to their home countries. I'm obviously a little bit biased considering I studied Greece and Egypt, and I've seen the campaigns that they're running to push countries to give marbles and give artifacts back. One thing I do find interesting is that we've set up laws in the United States dealing with the repatriation of Native American artifacts. So universities and museums actually have to contact a modern-day tribal leader and discuss what they want to do with either bones or artifacts or that sort of thing. And if they say they want them back, we have to send them back. This is also not a perfect situation. There's a lot of arguing within tribes to who has claims to certain things. But I do find it interesting that we have this resistance to giving things back to another country when we've recognized it in ourselves that this is something that needs to happen with the Native American groups. So speaking of the tone that I think is problematic to this book, I wanted to read a little excerpt basically from the end, from the epilogue, that I think illustrates kind of what I mean. Many of these sought-after pieces were taken generations ago under colonial rule or other ethically murky circumstances. Greece, meanwhile, revived its demands for the return of the Elgin marbles from the British Museum. It was an old argument made fresh by the $200 million museum the Greek government opened at the base of the Acropolis in 2008. Some of these claims carry moral weight, but just as often they are driven by emotion and nationalistic impulses. Ultimately, they do little to address the scourge of modern looting. I don't know if you can kind of get why that upset me a little bit just from the statement, but to imply that a country needs to separate itself from its history in order for the demands to be reasonable seems very odd to me. Like, you are always going to have an emotional and a nationalistic impulse when you talk about wanting to have artifacts returned, because that is part of a nation's identity. And so I think it's very strange that we've come in and we've taken a bunch of stuff and then are like, well, yes, but you shouldn't be emotional when you talk about returning things that we stole. I just thought the overall tone as the book went on started to get a little bit problematic. The book also tends to demonize archaeologists, which is certainly not going to win you any points in my book. So I do want to continue the discussion with you guys in the comments down below. I would love to hear what you think we should be doing. Should we be sending everything back, no questions asked, just give it all? Or do you think museums are serving their purpose, keeping artifacts and educating the public with things that they may never have an opportunity to see otherwise? I would love to know your opinions down below. Let me know if you've ever read anything like this. Do you kind of see what I'm getting at when I think the tone is a little bit problematic? Who should be held accountable for the stewardship of our history? Is this only a country thing? Is this an overall people thing? I don't know. I don't have the answers. I would love to hear your opinions down below. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button, subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, and I will talk to you all very soon with another video. Bye!